Okay.
There we go.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Clean Call, 29 November 2022. I don't know about you, but I'm in total denial over that date. My name is Wendy Abshire, and I'm really glad to welcome everyone who's able to join us live today, as well as those who are viewing this later as a recorded presentation. We will start with our usual announcements and then move to our guest speakers for today. Does anyone have announcements?
I have one.
Great.
So some of you may know that my colleagues and I wrote a book a few years ago, The Teacher-Friendly Guide to Climate Change. And we've been updating and enhancing the chapters of those books by moving them online on our platform called Earth at Home. And just last week, we published our most recent one, which is on climate change adaptation. I'll put the link in the chat. So you can find that chapter there. And then if you go back one level to the Earth at Home digital encyclopedia page, you'll find the other chapters. We don't have every chapter of the book up yet, but we're slowly making our way through them.
Well, congratulations, Ingrid. That's great. It's super
Thanks.
progress, and I know the network is interested. So I see James, your hand is up. It's hidden by the lion.
Yeah,
So
I know.
thank goodness.
The hand.
Thank goodness the prompt told me your hand was up.
But you got it. Thank you. So I want to make an announcement. This comes from the head of the middle school at Lowell School. So I'm speaking of what he told me. Starting this year, we are moving our focus of the focused work of climate education to the 5th grade. All 5th grade students will be getting intensive seminars on climate change. It will also have the characteristic of be blended education, which is beyond holistic education. It's not, well, we all teach it and we kind of talk to each other. These will be teachers, all more than one teacher sometimes in the same classroom together teaching climate change. That will consist of our school's climate education specialists and climate action specialists, our language arts teacher, math teachers, Spanish teachers, science teachers, and social justice teachers, all working together for blended education in the 5th grade. We will teach NGSS-based introductory science that leads to climate education before the 5th grade, and from the 5th grade to the 8th grade, there will, of course, not only be teaching in climate in the different classes, but not like intensive, but there'll be the continued climate club, which will be the elective course. Not, it's up to the students to do that, to be taking climate action, in which we have alumni now in high school and some entering college at Harvard and Stanford that continue to work with us. So we're talking students from the 5th grade through undergraduate working to be basically making a subject out of being climate action specialists, people who will learn to do that just as people learn to do ice skating or become a physicist or something else. It is something that is it's something that people need to do. And some people in our country will do that. So anyway, that's a pretty big announcement. And I think it's also, as you can see from the picture behind me, we're very much solidifying our partnership with the Smithsonian institutions, especially the Natural History Museum, but the zoo and the Air and Space and everywhere is, our students are now teachers at the Natural History Museum. They are being designated as experts in climate action. And so they're on the floor of the museum teaching to visiting families from all across the United States on what young people can do with multi-generational action on climate change. So I'm sorry, CLEO, on Institute, of taking up your time, but know that we also regard you as some of our most important partners. And we look forward to our students meeting with your students as early as a few weeks from now.
That's really compelling, James, and exciting and much needed. So congratulations and keep up the good work. We know it. We know it's needed.
Okay, and none of this would happen without the Clean Network. You'll all have to know that. We don't make this happen without every person in our little Brady Bunch box here. Okay.
Gina, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm going to rapid fire a few things. We have 2 things that we're trying to promote. One is a panel discussion tomorrow on women's rights and empowering youth in climate action that's associated with the Right Here, Right Now UN Global Climate Summit happening at CU Boulder that will take place tomorrow. I'll put the link in the chat. We're trying to get a good showing because it is virtual. The second thing is that CLEAN is doing a campaign to try to determine how CLEAN resources are used in the classroom. So if you yourself have used CLEAN resources, or if you know any teachers that have used CLEAN resources, it would be really awesome if you could share the survey that I just put in the chat. If you complete, it's not even really a survey, it's just giving us a testimonial, either written or video. You will receive a $10 gift card, so there's a little bit of an incentive. And then the last thing I just want to mention quickly is that next week we're having an informal discussion about AGU. So if you or any of your colleagues are attending AGU, virtual or in person, definitely join us next week, and we're going to try to figure out how we can support each other at the conference. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Gina. And Frank, I think we've got time for one more announcement, so I guess that'll be you.
No, not an announcement. I'm just wondering what's CLEAN. No, I'm just playing. I'm playing. I couldn't help myself. Sorry, dad jokes just don't stop.
Thanks.
No,
Thanks, Frank.
no need to stop. But if that's all you've got, who doesn't need a giggle? Well, all right then. Based on the plan, I think we want to leave plenty of time for our speakers today. And then we'll have time for Q&A as well. So to join today, we have Karolyn Burns and Diego Molina-Castrillon, both from the CLEO Institute. And they're presenting today on integrating citizen science with social justice to drive climate literacy. And isn't that just the bottom line for all of us? So if you wouldn't mind adding a little more information about yourselves as you take over the presentation here, Karolyn and Diego, I think everyone would like to understand in what capacities you're presenting today, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm Karolyn. I'm the Education and Curriculum Manager for CLEO, and this program, so basically we were awarded a grant in order to, do citizen science focusing on environmental justice. And they purchased some of these portable air quality monitors. And where I came in was I was looking over the requirements that they wanted the students to collect data and to talk to local officials. And I said, okay, I think we need to have a coherent curriculum for this project. Of course, we're going to have meetings, and I'm going to let Diego talk a little bit more about how he ran those meetings and what kind of responses he got from the students. But my first order of business was put together a workbook that the students could fill out. It was based on project-based learning. So we've got our citizen science, talking a bit about epistemology and data collection and how important that was. And then taking that into sort of a claims evidence reasoning framework where they create an argument based on what their data say. And then going and either writing letters or even presenting directly at city commission meetings about their findings. So becoming both citizen scientists and, science advocates. So I kind of did a lot of that backhand work. I'm turning this workbook into a lesson that we'll post on our CLEO website that will be aligned to, I know Florida's wonky and we have our own standards that not everyone else follows, but hopefully most people are going to be able to make use of it. And once it's ready, we will be submitting it to the CLEAN collection. And I think y'all know me a little bit at this point. I've been a member of CLEAN for the past few years. I do some of the curriculum review workshops. And I mention CLEAN resources in our teacher network newsletter all the time. So I'm a really big advocate of having this resource, and I'm so happy to maybe be able to contribute to it.
Sorry, hi everyone. My name is Diego Molina-Castrillon. I'm the School and Youth Program Manager at CLEO. I'm based out of Miami, Florida. I have a background in education. I taught middle and high school for almost a decade until I took this opportunity to join the CLEO Institute. I apologize, I had a great Thanksgiving, but my body is telling me that it shouldn't have been that great. So I am recovering from a bit of a cold. And where Karolyn did a lot of the theoretical, the background work, I actually got the chance to use the workbook and the curriculum that she created and put it into practice. So we chose students from all around the Miami-Dade County. It is the largest county in all of Florida. We chose 10 different students around the county by different zip codes. And what we wanted to do is engage the students in being a little bit more conscious on what their environment looks like and what kind of privileges they have based on their socioeconomic background, their race, their ethnicity, and then how can they learn how to support each other and being more aware of how they can improve their own communities and their fellows communities. And I think having said that, we can start the actual presentation on how that went about.
Certainly, I'm going to go ahead and share screen, and I'll get that started. Also, I apologize in advance. I see, Gina, you have cats as well. I'm fostering kittens. So if you hear any background information or background noise, that's probably what it is.
No need to apologize about cats in the background. It's one of my favorite things.
All right, so this is the presentation we put together about the project. This will also be the title of the paper that will be published soon about this project in the Science Teacher, which is the National Science Teaching Association's journal for sort of high school age students. I got confirmation that it will be coming out in the March-April edition. So we're really excited for that. A little bit about us. This is the CLEO Institute. We are members of CLEAN. We are a nonprofit that does climate education and advocacy. We are nonpartisan. We work with all different kinds of folks and primarily, educational, focusing in on climate and environmental justice. So we're all about following the science. And this is something that I love about CLEAN as well, where they are consistently updating their resources to reflect the newest data. That is something we also make a serious effort to do. I'm sure you all have seen similar statistics to this in the past. We know that representation of women and BIPOC individuals in STEM is, not what it should be, and that we're all better when we are utilizing, everyone's unique background and everyone has an opportunity to, succeed in these fields. But one of the things that we notice, or at least I know that I've noticed, is that a lot of the traditional focuses for STEM are not particularly appealing to these kinds of students. So I remember we had a robotics club when I was an undergrad, and they basically just did battle bots. There was a computer/coding club, and they were playing or creating video games. I had no interest in either of those things. However, if the robotics club had mentioned anything about unmanned underwater vehicles doing oceanographic research, or, when it came to coding, if anyone had communicated to me when I was, 13, 14, 15, that I was going to need coding for my ecology classes, that would have been so much more motivating. And, I'm happy with where I ended up, but I do think that that was definitely a missed opportunity for me. And so what we're seeing is that, these authentic applications, particularly applications that deal with altruism and social justice and building and serving community, are particularly compelling for both female students and students of color, and in particular, students who fall into sort of both categories. So having something like this, where, I think in this case, climate change is a really great example of a topic that is, or it can be very STEM focused, but the impacts are so wide reaching and so crucial from a humanitarian context that you can really get students, really into it. So they're more motivated because this is something that truly matters to themselves and to people they care about. Diego, you want to talk a little bit about what your meetings look like?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, we had these 10 different students, and obviously because it was all around the county, it was impossible for us to meet in person. So we took advantage of meeting over Zoom. We met over Zoom for a couple months. It was once a week we would meet with them, and every week we would have a different theme. So at the beginning, the meetings would be around being a little developing that awareness of what your surroundings look like, collecting some anecdotal data as far as like the tree canopy in your neighborhoods, being more aware of like the roadways near your house, public access to transit, all these different things. And as the fellowship went on, we started realizing that very organically, the students would start sharing what they are seeing in their neighborhoods. And they would start asking the questions that we had already prepared for them. So it was beautiful to see that even though we had kind of like laid out this pathway, it came very natural to the students to want to collaborate, to want to contribute to each other's research. And it was so much so that one of our fellows actually wrote her own paper about this, about the whole fellowship. And later on as the fellowship went on, we talked about the data that they were gathering. We talked about what we could do with that data. Excuse me, I don't have a cat, but I have a 2-year-old. B, can you come get her, please? So sorry about that.
Also, we're all also okay with kids in the background.
Not a problem, Diego.
Sorry about that. She knows that I said close the door, and she got it on her own. So like I was saying, Kay previously mentioned the idea of like doing citizen science as well as some advocacy to the program. So we also gave the students a training on how to write op-eds in their local newspapers, as well as how to speak to their local elected officials. We gave them a couple of trainings with that, and then they would submit some of their drafts and give them feedback on it. We would meet one-on-one with a couple of them, the ones that seemed like they were more prepared to like have the op-eds published. I will say that unfortunately, we weren't able to get any of the op-eds published, but out of the 10 fellows, 6 or 7 of them did get to meet with their elected officials. And it was amazing to see high school students speak to, politicians, local politicians who they regarded as somewhat out of reach or intimidating. And thanks to the training and to us attending the meetings with them, it was great to see these students take the reins on these meetings and say, like, these are our findings. This is what we interpreted from our data. This is what we would like to see happen in our communities. And ultimately, at the end, ask the elected officials, what are you willing to do about that? So we went from students that were obviously rather intimidated by the whole process. I remember the first time we told them that they would be meeting with elected officials. Some of them just like wide-eyed, like you're caught in the headlights, to having the students in the meeting say, okay, we need more bike lanes, and just straight up demanding these changes from their elected officials. It was very encouraging to see that. And that was what we really wanted them to do. It's not just about them raising that awareness, but it's also them taking actionable steps. And now knowing that these students are understanding a little bit more about how local politics works and impacts their day-to-day life, it's interesting to see how they are now trying to engage in that process a lot more than they were before. Go ahead, Kay. Sorry about that.
So one of the really cool things about this project is that while we were very lucky in that we had received a grant and we were able to purchase those air quality monitors that were shown in the last slide, they're called Flow by Plume Labs, and they're about $200 each, although we did get them back to use them for other projects. But if you look at the overall structure of what we did, it is very adaptable and very applicable to multiple settings. The updated workbook actually does go into this, where we made it much more generic in that we're not asking in particular about air quality, but any environmental parameters that the students can measure. And so Diego mentioned that one of the first things they did was looking at tree cover. Students could, count trees in their neighborhoods and, pull in data like if you've ever seen the tree equity score. They could measure temperature and look at urban heat islands. If you're going to be looking at plastic pollution, we know that plastic is a petrochemical byproduct. And so reducing our reliance on plastic will also help us to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels as well. So really anything that's important to the students. And that's a really cool thing as well, is that part can also be student-led. You could have students brainstorm a couple different ideas of what do we want to measure, what do we think is important, and then, maybe work as a class to make that decision. And this doesn't have to, cost anything. The EJ screen tool, environmental justice screen from the EPA, has lots of data. Justice 40, Air Now, and we did this over the course of many weeks, and it was pretty involved. But again, you can adapt it to your context. So this was done with high schoolers. If we're counting trees, I could see 4th or 5th graders completing this project, although you'd probably have to come up with something different than the workbook. But, it could be something done, in a day or two worth of class, or this could be done over the entire semester as a term project. Again, we provide as much scaffolding as we can. And if the teacher wants to do it similar to the way we did it, then it can kind of be an off-the-shelf lesson. But if that doesn't work for them in their classroom, then there's a lot of different ways that this can be modified. And it does adhere to Florida standards. We've got reading and writing. You've got your writing, persuasive writing, nonfiction, as I said, claims, evidence, reasoning. We've got social studies talking about, justice and, the difference in environmental quality in different neighborhoods. And then we're also, creating averages and looking at graphs. So this could also be something that is cross-curricular, perhaps a collaboration between a bunch of different teachers who are looking at different aspects of the program. Again, it's very, very adaptable, which was a goal of mine. So you're probably familiar with at least the idea of claims evidence reasoning, if not, the exact educational jargon. This is also very similar to argument-driven inquiry, which is claims evidence justification, if that's something that you've ever worked with. So they make a claim. The claim is basically one sentence, just answering a question. In this case, the question is, so does the air quality vary around Miami? And, Miami-Dade County, and their answer was yes. So then they provide evidence. This is the evidence they gathered from using those flow devices to get air quality data. And they explained why this evidence, was appropriate, why it was useful. And then the hardest thing for students, and I say this, for their high school students, but I also teach college classes. It's difficult for them. I myself, as a graduate student, have had this called out in my papers for being insufficient. So the reasoning really is the hardest part, not just saying the data speaks for itself, but really explaining what it means. And this is something that I think is a very valuable and a very transferable skill. This is where, Diego, if you want to chime in a little bit, just talking about how this fits into like English language arts. I know that's your specialty.
Yeah, so the idea was for the students to be able to connect the evidence with the claim that they were making, and then just connecting those dots. A lot of times students don't really understand how to use the evidence that they found to support their argument. And ultimately, it's just for them, we kind of like have to have a conversation with them. We don't really want to give them the answer, but through like a conversation, through like different questions, get them to understand that ultimately the evidence does or does not support their claim, and how can they support that argument. And most of the time, actually, yeah, I believe all the students ultimately had the right reasoning, that it was clear that depending on where you live in Miami-Dade County, you are going to have a difference in air quality which is also closely related to your socioeconomic background.
Exactly. Yeah, that's creating an argument from evidence. I said very transferable. So here is the chart they used to gather their data. They were asked to provide both qualitative data and quantitative data. So date, time, location throughout the day. And then notes to give you the qualitative data, we asked them to keep an eye out for, as Diego had mentioned, local transit options. You know, are they near a highway? I noticed that when I was doing this as a practice run, the values would always spike when I was in a parking garage, which makes sense. It's underground. There's a whole lot of exhaust coming out of the cars, and there's very little airflow. So, you know, the evidence I had showed that there was a spike in air quality, and I was able to use reasoning to explain how my evidence supported that claim that, you know, that underground parking garages have particularly poor air quality. And this was really helpful because this was scaffolding, so that the students were able to see, you know, what data was important and needed to be collected, and how to organize it. Again, if this is something that you're doing with more advanced students, or you have a really long amount of time to be doing it, you could work with the students to have them develop their own data tables and ask, what do you think is important for you to be collecting? You know, where would you want to do it? So this can be something that is sort of pre-decided, or this could be a little bit more student-led if you have time and resources for that. Right, back to you.
So one of the things that we asked the students to do was to either take pictures and to take a picture with their air plume wherever they were that day, and keep a daily vlog. So this was Natalia, I believe her last name was Quintero. She lived in a suburban area in the south of the county. So in the video, she's talking about like what she's seeing that day. And again, it's about them creating that awareness of what's happening around their neighborhood. What do they see as far as like major roadways, the traffic? A couple of students also commented, just like Kay mentioned, the air quality would drop in highly transited zones. And it was mainly around their pickup drop-off areas in their schools. So that raised a concern, and it was interesting to see that they were then telling their friends about it. So it became kind of like a conversational piece for not only within the fellows, but also in their group setting, like with their friends and with their family members as well. Hey, you can go on to the next one if you'd like.
Sorry if you could see me messing with the settings. I was trying to make sure I shared audio so that we could play this clip really quickly for everyone.
Walking home from school now, and I just turned on my plume air pollution sensor, and the air pollution is very, very low. I mean, it's like perfect. I am in a very well ventilated area. We got a lot of trees, a lot of nature. So yeah, makes sense that the air pollution's low. This did change at school today. We had a lot of trucks, a lot of food delivery trucks coming in, and I noticed that the air pollution was a little high. It was actually moderate, as opposed to it being usually low when I'm in school when there's not as many trucks around. So yeah, we'll continue to vlog throughout the week and update you all.
So I think one of the interesting things that I saw in this project was the students becoming more aware. And I know I've mentioned this word a lot of times, but it's about the students understanding what is around them. You know, they didn't really care about tree canopy before. They didn't mind being stuck in traffic before. It was like normal to them. But because we had this conversation beforehand, then during their videos, during their conversations with friends, they started talking about these different things. So that was, to me, a major part of this project, just raising that awareness, turning that light switch on, and then starting to see their surroundings in a different lens.
Thank you. And I would also like to point out that you know, at this point where she's doing the video diary, you know, she's on her own here. So this is independent sense making. She is collecting data as she goes and evaluating that data, you know, as she's walking home. There's no one there sort of prompting her to say, well, what do you think this means? They're really developing that self-efficacy of I can do science. I can collect data and understand what it means. For a lot of students, I've noticed, I teach in the community college context myself. And yeah, a lot of students, when you say the words data analysis, their eyes get as big as saucers. They're terrified. And then when you have them collecting their own data, when you give them this authentic context and they see it through, you know, a social justice lens, you know, they're a lot more open to it. And then they're not quite as intimidated. So I think that was also, you know, in particular, when we're talking about students who historically may not have a great science background or who may not have been able to access good science education. I think that that is a really great way to sort of get them on board and have them thinking of themselves as scientists and not just passively receiving information, which is really key when you want to, you know, ideally get them into STEM fields or even just, you know, or even just thinking that science and critical thinking are important in their daily lives.
So we had several means of assessments, whether it was the C claims evidence reasoning writing, and then later on they had to write this email to their elected officials, where, as you can see, they talk about what the fellowship was about, what did they learn, how did they learn it, and what are some of the next steps that they'd like to see happen in their communities. We gave them a basic template, but ultimately we wanted them to be able to use their own voice. And the whole point of my program is to platform these students, regardless of where they're studying, that they're better able to like connect with their community at large. So whether it was a privileged student attending a private high school, or a student from a lower socioeconomical background attending not as well funded public school, we got an opportunity for all of them to be able to engage their community and understand that they actually can have a bigger impact than they expect. We expected that those students that have a more privileged background would feel a little more at ease engaging with their elected officials, and they understand what is supposed to happen. Having your family members and your parents have that institutional knowledge of how to navigate certain public spheres is a huge factor on how these students engage with the project. But I can gladly say that because we made the project accessible, we made it a very relaxed environment. Even though all the students were able to do so, and they understood that, you know, maybe your parents don't understand what you're really doing, whether it's a language barrier or just like a lack of understanding of what's happening. My other partner and I were able to guide the students through this, and you can definitely see how they felt encouraged and they felt empowered, and they understood that, you know, just because you come from a certain area of Miami-Dade County doesn't mean that you don't have a voice. And that was ultimately what I wanted the students to get out of it. You know, all of the students have a specific voice, and the idea of like everybody being able to support each other regardless of your zip code or wherever you attend school. It's about creating a student-led movement where everybody's collaborating with each other to, again, be able to get a little bit closer to that justice and equity aspect that we are desperately in need of.
Hi, I'm Maya, and I live in Miami, Florida. Personally, climate change has definitely impacted my community in multiple ways. Miami is known as a frontline community in the climate crisis and is devastated by rising sea levels and worsening health impacts. We need to implement a strong climate literacy program and opportunities to mitigate the effects of the crisis. Climate can't wait. Thank you.
So, you know, here they are doing advocacy on behalf of their communities, really making that clear case. And that's about it. As I said, we're going to be having that paper come out soon. I will be sort of sharing that link on the listserv. If anyone is interested in sort of looking over the workbook, as I said, I'm going to be developing that into a full-fledged lesson plan with a teacher's guide and potentially, maybe some slides and presentations to make it easier. I will be looking for feedback on that. So yeah, that's where we're gonna go with it. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing so I can go back to see everyone and potentially see the chat, because I wasn't able to look at folks' responses while I was presenting.
Thank you both, Karolyn and Diego. That was great. I mean, impactful work, and I wish I would have been a kid in the community that would have been able to connect with you all those years ago to bring that curiosity and connect it to life skills and also the important work that the clean community cares about. I see we have a lot of questions. I'm going to call on folks in the order that they came up or comments. So Katie, how about you first?
Yeah, and I actually have to go in a couple of minutes, so thank you for letting me go first. Mine's more of a comment than a question, and I just wanted to say this is so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing it. It's really really cool work and really neat activities to engage students in. I loved that you did data analysis as well as the claims evidence reasoning framework and engaging students in that sort of multiple subjects of science and language arts or humanities-based subjects. And I just wanted to mention that we don't have funding for this yet, but we have interest and desire. We've talked about it for a couple of years, but we're actually hoping we can do some work in the nearish future to expand CLEAN to be more relevant to other subjects. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of encourage you, Karolyn, to develop a teacher's guide for that, because this would be something that would totally fit into CLEAN, and I would love to have that, go through review with. So yeah, but it does need to be a more finalized version for our reviewers to look at it. But if you do need somebody to look at a teacher's guide in the meantime, I'm happy to do that for you, or just give it an extra eye here or there. But I just wanted to say, this is awesome, and I would love it to be featured in CLEAN. So let's definitely stay in communication about it.
Awesome. I'm really happy to hear that. Let me real quick see if I can go find the link to the workbook, which I want to say for that one, major credit goes to Karol, who is our social media and graphic design person. She made it look absolutely fantastic. You want the link to view. All right, there we go.
I also know that earlier while we were presenting, James had a question about if we are multi-generational organization. Usually the CLEO Institute is more of a youth-led, let me be clear, Gen CLEO is our youth-led advocacy program. So if my focus is mainly on high school students, one of my colleagues focuses on college students. And we're constantly trying to figure out how both of these groups can collaborate with each other, mainly because we see that high school students are sometimes intimidated by wanting to engage with climate action, and they don't know how to get around to it, whether it's because it's a voting age issue or something like that. Our college students are a little bit more mature in many different ways. So we want them to be a little bit more involved in collaborating with our younger students. And ultimately, it's just about teaching them how they can learn to work alongside each other.
All right. Yeah. So Ingrid, you want to add to the conversation here?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add my congratulations. What an amazing program. It's really outstanding. I had a question. I was curious, how were the students received, or what kind of responses did they get from the letters they wrote or the interactions they had with local officials?
So I can say that some of the elected officials were very happy to hear from them. They were interested in what they were doing, what the project was about. One of the elected officials was even interested in getting some of the air quality sensors and putting them around their city just so they can learn a little bit more about it. And then some other elected officials, we didn't hear from them. They didn't even reply to the emails. So we had a variety of responses from like very welcoming, enthusiastic elected officials to others who literally didn't even reply to the emails. But the ones that we did hear from were eager to meet with the students, hear what they had to say. They were willing to like listen to some of the questions and actually engage in a conversation as far as like air quality in their whether it was their city or their community.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've noticed that ultimately when it's students, when it's youth engaging elected officials are always very excited to hear from them. And I'm very glad that the students were very well prepared and it wasn't just kind of like a show for the students, and it didn't feel like we were like puppeteering or anything. That was like a huge worry that I had. I didn't want it to feel like we were manipulating the students or using the students. From the beginning, we told the students, look, we're going to be in the meeting and we'll help you prepare for the meeting, but we want you to take the lead. And in one of the meetings, one of the students was visibly nervous where I had to start the meeting and start talking about the project. And then, I don't know, something snapped and this student just like took the reins back and said, okay, and then this is what we did. So it was encouraging to see that the students were very well engaged and so were the elected officials interested in what the students had to say.
I think a lot of the success from the students came from just their level of preparation. We have our youth advocacy group within CLEO. We spent a lot of time sort of working on strategies to prepare, students and young people for these kind of meetings. Again, kudos to Diego and as well Glennis, who is the associate program manager in this program. They did a really great job. And I keep using the education jargon, but just, yeah, scaffolding what those meetings are going to look like, what was going to be expected of them. And, I think a lot of the fear and nervousness just comes from not knowing what to expect. So, yeah, major props to Diego on that one. Your mentorship was definitely a big part of what led those students to be so, so confident and articulate. Frank?
Sure. I love what you guys are doing here. So thank you very much for making the time to be with us. One quick thought that just Diego, your point about student voice. There's some really interesting research out in North Carolina, I believe, on intergenerational dialogue and using the intergenerational in how it works with the younger voice with the older, participant. Really powerful research. So everything you said, I've seen that a couple of times, but that just beads right along beautifully. And it's very powerful and deeply underutilized. So, and it's not puppeteering at all if you do it right. So, but the thing I wanted to share with you is there is a program that I think where CLEO works, but this is open to anybody, even internationally, is the urban heat mapping campaigns. The applications are open now through December 13th. I would think with, Southern Florida or anywhere in Florida, urban heat issues are very substantial. And so there's a great campaign there, totally maps, but it isn't just the mapping, right? Because it's also working with communities. Once you have the map, to what do you do to reduce the vulnerabilities of where extreme heat is disproportionately and unfortunately proven through redlining to be exacerbating inequalities. Not everyone is feeling those impacts the same, even inside a one heat wave in the same community. But having a map allows you to do things that actually reduce those vulnerabilities once you understand where the disproportionate is. So it's open now. It maps, I think, very nicely to what you're doing with air quality and tree cover, which is totally related to what we're talking about. So anyway, just a thought that might be something. There are a couple Southern Florida communities that have already done it, but that doesn't mean there aren't more. So thank you for making.
And Frank, I saw you threw some of those links in the chat, and Diego, I know you were working your way through the chat. You probably saw those by now. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I clicked on all of them. I have I have a window with like 5 different tabs. Thank you, Frank.
Awesome. Any other comments, questions, words of support? I'd love to hear more, Karolyn and Diego, a little bit about, I mean, you're telling us about what you've been doing, and I loved everything about your presentation. You obviously put great work into it, even just taking us through the journey. I'd love to hear more about what's next.
So right now we are figuring out how we are going to redo this fellowship again. We found that during the time frame that we did it, students were dealing with like finals and college applications and all these different things. So we want to shift the time frame to another timeline. And aside from that, right now the program that CLEO chapters does, the kind of like an after school club that we have in about like 15 different high schools in both Dade County and Broward County. We're undertaking this idea of, and this is something that we do every year, improving the awareness of the community as far as like climate change goes. And so later on at the beginning of next year, we'll be doing a climate innovation challenge. So the idea is for students to research how climate change is directly impacting their community. One of the things that we like to talk about to the students is that when we talk about climate change, a lot of times we talk about the polar ice caps are melting and the wildfires out in the West and giant hurricanes, but a lot of our students haven't really or aren't really aware of the direct impact they've had to climate change. So the idea of this challenge is for them to understand how climate change is directly impacting their community, and also what is a solution to it. Again, we don't want to just focus on the doom and gloom of climate change. We also want to give students some sort of hope and something to look forward in the future. That's one of the things that we're going to be doing earlier on next year. And then they'll be presenting it to their community and they'll be submitting it to a large repository of another organization called CABU, Climate Action Voces Unidas, based out of New Mexico. And again, the idea is for the students to form more of a community of climate activists. One of the things that we found towards the end of last school year is a lot of students felt they were very isolated. They felt like it was only about student activists within their school, and not even within their school. A lot of times within their school, it's just their ecology club or their environmental club, and that's it. So because of Zoom, and I think thanks to Zoom, we're able to foster a more community building environment. And that's where I give a shout out to James. We're looking to connect some of our student activists from Florida with some of the students that he engages with, so that students understand that there is a lot of, there's a giant group of students from all over the country that want to collaborate, that want to learn from each other. And I think it was James who brought it up that students from Florida don't understand the power that they have because unfortunately they sometimes feel underrepresented or they don't feel very well heard by the powers that be. So one of the biggest things that we're trying to do is get them to understand that they can be a part of a larger group of students who want to learn from each other and form a stronger community that way.
Diego, you touched on a couple things that often come up on clean calls, are including the importance of keeping the sense of hope and also how people can really feel isolated in this work. So those are real things we talk about frequently and are grappling with too. And people may have more comments on that. I see James and Eric both have their hands up. So James, how about you? And then Eric.
Thank you, Wendy. And actually, I'm going to run with what Diego just brought up a bit of an example of just how powerful it is when youth-based, or at least many people in youth in the programs connect with each other and support. One is, I think, almost universally, people are pretty excited. Our high school students are really looking forward to talking with your high school students and the college students and so on. But there is so much value in having the different programs who may or may not be working on the same thing. Either way, it's fine. If they're different things, it proves the point. There are a million things we have to do about climate change. So there's a million things you can choose from to do about climate change. Don't, which way you're going to look at it, right? But the other is, we learned from our techniques, but we also learned from our successes and methods. And this is the one I want to give, and I want to do to you. And I'm trying to be sharp, but I think this is right to the point on the thing of our students in California. The ones that are most advanced in doing things with AGU started with in a survey of a place that I won't name, but Eric, you and I know it well, where we surveyed it and they surveyed it, and they found a lot of problems with the energy efficiency, ones that could be easily corrected. And they wrote, and they're members of this organization. They're volunteers and interns there. So, I mean, they put in a lot of time, and they wrote to all the directors who are applicable and said, we'd like to present things. And the directors totally blew them off and didn't say a word. They just, we don't have to talk to you. Okay. Well, on the East Coast, we're at the, okay, without naming the other place, but the Air and Space Museum of the Smithsonian, right? We've got the Smithsonian welcoming our students to do things, to say things at the floor of the museum, taking their recommendations. So I don't know if it's a good idea to ignore our students. Together, we're learning, we're being taken seriously, and you're going to look really stupid if you keep this up. You could easily be making energy efficiency survey, results going on. Anyway, we want to share that with Florida. You may have successes that we can use. We can do that. Do you see the thing? It's like we're building a movement that ignore the young people or the people who work multi-generational at your peril. Okay? We're not messing around. We will be friendly, we will be civil, we will do things, but we will not be ignored. So I think that's one thing I look forward to working with you all about. Okay.
Oh yeah, I wasn't there. I'm up in the Tallahassee office, but there was one commissioner, and it wasn't to do with this project, although there's a lot of cross-pollination, as I'm sure you can imagine, who basically yelled at the students that they wouldn't care so much about climate change when like the nuclear bombs started going. Like it was in sort of the height of, concern about Russia and nuclear proliferation. But yes, basically saying that they were dumb and naive to worry about this when clearly, we were going to have a nuclear Armageddon first. So I want to say credit to them for being confused and angry rather than defeated from that one.
Yeah.
I would say that, when it comes to those kind of things, I experience it myself, and, it's like, I'm an adult, I vote, I pay taxes, and they don't listen to me necessarily either. So I think going in with sort of this expectation of, okay, like whether or not they listen, you're doing the right thing, and here's a group of people who've been through this and support you. I think that's really key to avoiding disengagement and burnout. And I get that's important for people our age as well, but it's especially critical if you have students who are just doing their first sort of civic engagement activities, is sort of moderate expectations going in and provide a lot of debriefing and support going out. Just making sure, because it is so easy to internalize that kind of thing and to think that, your project wasn't good enough or you didn't speak well enough. And then you got to have somebody come back like, no, I've been through this before. Trust me, it's not you, it's them. You did fantastic, honey. And, we're going to come back and fight another day. And so, it comes back to what Diego was saying about like building community. That is just such a key part in general of making this kind of, potentially emotionally draining activism actually sustainable for people.
Yeah. Hey, I'm looking at the clock here, and let's try if we can have one more comment, question, and a quick response, and then we'll take all this great energy forward into the coming week. So Eric.
Thanks, Wendy. And yeah, it was just resonating with me what Diego, you were saying about that, and what Jim and you are working on, the peer-to-peer connection and what Zoom enables, because it can feel really isolating. And one of the most poignant statements, I did a presentation for a high school group, and I'm working closely with a high school group, Oakland Tech here in Oakland. And we were just looking at what's happening across the globe to similar climate zones to Oakland. And one of the young women in the class said, after seeing this, it makes me feel not alone, and so like I really like those short video testimonials, and sort of the two young women that you had in the presentation. That was really well done. And just, I think youth respond to youth. And there was a session at COP that I attended virtually that was all about not just youth needing resources from adults, but being drivers of the conversation as well. And so just really applaud, both of those things, and sort of want to just amplify that work. And I'm trying to sort of model the same thing as some programs I'm working on.
Appreciate you. I think as a closing thought, I would say that because I've gotten the chance to like teach at different schools and predominantly Hispanic and Latino neighborhoods, I realized that a lot of times students don't really understand the power of their voice, because in my culture, it's not very normal for people to engage in politics, and they feel like they shouldn't have to. And if they do, then it's wrong, or they're wasting their time, or they're being hippies, or they're doing all these different things. So I understand that I have to kind of like not just teach them, but they have to unlearn some behaviors, or they have to unlearn some things that they've unfortunately learned, but very justifiably have learned from their parents, because I value their parents' experience and some of that trauma, and teach them like, no, like the whole point of being in the US is that you get to engage in this way, and you can actually make a difference in your community. So that's why I constantly bring up like platforming and advocating and empowering the students, because yes, we might have all the answers, but the idea would be for the students to find their own answers and also learn how to communicate their own answers. And I would say, I just put it in the chat real quick. I actually taught it out in East Oakland. And a big part of my climate journey goes to the students that I got to teach out in East Oakland. They were the ones to teach me about environmental racism. And when it was the students teaching me like what environmental racism looks like and how it actually impacts their community, I knew that I had to do something a little more for them. So it's a beautiful way of like bringing the whole thing around. So thank you for that comment.
Awesome. Awesome. Karolyn, Diego, thank you so much for being so well prepared and doing such inspiring work. I think you've made us all feel better today, which gives us more of what we need to keep doing the work, right? So thank you. And it sounds like next week's call at our same regular time will be focused on our preparations for AGU. So hope to see you next week as well.
All right. Thank you for letting us share. We're really, we're really proud of the kids. They did such a
should be. Should be. Yeah. All right. See you all next week.
All right. Thanks much.
Thank you.